Okay, so this is actually uh, sorry for kind of randomly not being live earlier. Still trying to fiddle with this new YouTube live streaming thing. So, um, just gonna let's see here. Hopefully, some people will pop in and watch. Gonna pause that. Okay. Quick bit of what I'm doing right now is resin casting. So I've already made the molds for this, and molds are here. So hopefully this will kind of sort of make sense. These are two-part molds. Make first half, second half. Product I use is from Silpack because they're local to me. So this is the actual silicone base, and this is the activator. So this catalyst, I guess. So this will mix together 10 parts to one part of this. And we can make all sorts of fun molds here. So what I have here is, well, let's take a look at the master. Right, so I modified a Zaku Exceed head. That's what this originally looks like. Maybe I should get into camera. All right, let me adjust the camera view so this is a little bit, makes a little bit more sense. There we see more of the desk. See my fat ass. Again, work in progress. So hopefully I'll figure this one out, and we'll have some more fun. So this is the Zac. Actually, it's a Goof custom head that I made in comparison with the Zaku head, which is model kits. So what I'm doing is I made a mold of the master. So these are all the little molds. Let me put this guy away first so I don't drop it and destroy the master. So these are all the molds I made for the thing. Now what I'm going to do is I'll get to this later on, but let's start off by talking a little bit about the silicone mold. So again, silicone mold, 2 pieces because I'm just used to working with 2-piece molds. Seems like kind of a waste of silicone. It is kind of expensive, but this is what I'm used to working with and style of casting I'm used to doing. Excuse me. And this is easy for me to stack stuff together. So what I'm getting ready to do, well, aside from that, is there needs to be a mold release agent. So this is a mold release agent that I used to make sure that the parts pop out of this fairly easily. So just going to go straight into filling with this, or filling these. So glove, I was doing this without a glove earlier, last couple of days, and realized that I got rid of my fingerprints for a good couple hours before the resin came off my fingers. So yeah, it's this stuff's not fun to mess with. What I'm using is it's a 15-minute resin. So it takes 15 minutes to complete. Actually, it's more of like a 5 to 6 minute resin. So what that means is that the resin has about 5 to 6 minutes once it's mixed to before it starts gelling up and is no longer liquid. So I like this better than like the 3-minute one because I have a little bit more time to work with, and with molds that are a little bit bigger, it gives it time for it to get into some of those, deeper crevices and whatnot. So this is part A. So I'm just going to measure out. I'm going to be casting these 4 blocks here. So using a scale, this is measured at a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to pour out about 20 grams. This is actually a very inaccurate scale because it's used for a kitchen and doesn't have uh, like a sub-gram values. So I'm just gonna get close to that. So right now it's at 21 grams. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to match this as best as I can with the hardener. Now, the thing with the hardener is you should shake it up considerably. It says shake well. This, you don't need to shake at all. You just need to worry about this crystallizing if you let it sit for a while. So that's nice and mixed up. And I'm going to go ahead and pour about 20 grams in here. Now this stuff, the hardener is heavier. So you really need the scale to measure this out. 36. Famous last words of me messing with this while I try to broadcast and cast at the same time, which should be fun because I'll hopefully not make too many mistakes. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mix this stuff up. So you can see that it's gonna actually become warm to the touch because this is an exothermic reaction. It's gonna get pretty warm and pretty hot to cure or while it's curing. So if you feel that it's starting to get warm, you're on the right track. If it doesn't feel warm at all, your resin has gone bad because it should get warm as you mix the two parts together. So now that they're fairly well mixed, see, I didn't mix too long. I just made sure that my regular bamboo stick skewer is mixing it well. Wipe that clean. Try to keep my desk clean, but who knows? Okay, I'm going to work a little fast here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour, and I'm going to squeeze my mold a little bit because I have these crevices in there that will suck in the resin, right? So the way the mold's designed, I have this little lip here that will clamp down here, and I have a exhaust hole up here that will extrude resin as I press down upon this. Now another trick I like to do is as I'm pressing down, pour more resin and slowly let go. Now this makes sure that you have a good seal and that you get rid of most of the air pockets in there. Again, squeeze. You can see the bubbles kind of come up while you're squeezing. Let's see here. Drop the lid, squeeze down, push down on the mold a little bit, pour resin, and slowly lift up. So it's sucking in, filling in that cavity. Keep going. Try to work a little faster because it's starting to cure up on me. Again, push down. Again, you want to be wearing gloves when you're doing this because this resin is an adhesive. It's going to stick fairly well to things except for the silicone rubber. So this part I'm just going to do the same thing. This is the antenna fin. So I'm going to squeeze down the middle of it. You can see that resin's coming out the side. And again, push down. While I'm pushing down, slowly let go. So I'm going to push my resin boxes together. And what I'm going to do now is going to run over to my pressure pot and excuse me while I go pressurize this. what you hear there is my compressor going. So what I want to do is I'm just gonna let that build pressure while we kind of have this on the side so that you can see as this gels up as I work on these parts. So let me go check on my pressure pot to make sure it's not overfilled. Okay, so pressure pot's filled. This is still starting to kind of gel a little bit. It's still liquid. So, and I got resin all over my fingers, which is why you should wear gloves as I keep touching the damn cup. So, I'm just going to set this aside on top of some silicone. So, that will be good there for a little bit while I get to demolding these parts. Now earlier when I said that we have some exhaust holes, I'll explain a little bit about the reason behind that. It's physics, right? So I have a mold like this, right? Now if there's for when I pour in that mixture of resin into here, right? And if I don't have an exhaust hole, I'm going to press this down, and once I pressurize this, the mold doesn't really have anywhere for that resin to seep out, or even air bubbles to seep out. So when I mix this together, I'm putting in a lot of air bubbles as I'm mixing. Even if I'm shaking the bottle, I'm putting a lot of air bubbles, or introducing a lot of air bubbles. So when you put this under pressure in a pressure pot, it's going to compress all that liquid, and it's going to force the air to the topmost area, right? So what ends up happening is that air has nowhere to go. It's trapped inside the mold, right? So a lot of these molds are, air could escape a little bit off the sides, but for all intents and purposes, if this is sitting there in my pressure pot, there's nowhere for that bubble to go. It's going to sit on top of the side of the mold, and it's just going to be trapped there. And what you end up with is something that looks kind of like this. So you see here, there's these bubble marks here, right? I get very thin resin because there's a very big bubble, and this is where that that air bubble was trapped inside the mold. It had nowhere to escape. So, as a lesson learned, I drill out air holes, or when you're making these molds, stick something in there and have an air hole ready. So when you're building resin kits, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with resin kits. There's usually a flash tab. Now these are tabs that are connected to the pieces like this right here, and that's basically allows that bubble to escape and that resin to fill in. So this will make sense as I demold this or try to demold this, and this could go all sorts of wrong because I'm doing this live, and I'm pretty sure I'm safe with this piece of cast resin here. So I'm gonna kind of pry off the excess resin. This seems like a lot of wasted resin, but necessary evil, I guess. I mean, a buddy of mine uses a syringe to apply his resin just so he could keep every last drop. He's of course Chinese too, so that makes kind of sense. So I'm just gonna pop this mold apart, and you can see that it's a pretty good casting. Just gonna remove some of the excess Now, one of those things that happens when you are casting, especially with two-part molds like this, if you don't completely seal up the mold, you're going to have some misaligned resin here because the mold is two parts. And along this edge, you're going to have this really thick flash. What it should be very similar to is kind of very paper thin flash that that will just peel right off the kit. So I'm just going to kind of dig in here, grab and carefully pull this so I don't tear my mold. Again, the mold release will help the life of this mold as I pull more and more molds from it. Okay, so that's one mold. I want to clean off the excess cured resin out of here because that will keep this from shutting correctly, and keep my mold fairly clean. So that's that part demolded, and we get to look at this side of the headpiece. So this is where my two molds had met up. So there's going to be a bit of flash there, which when you're building resin kits, this is just a fact of life. It's a mold line. It's where the two pieces meet. What I'd like to do is clean it up a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of trim off the excess flash without chopping off my fingers or completely damaging the part. I could go ahead and clean this up a little bit more if I want. I really don't care to. The idea is, people are kind of interested in this, so I'm going to sell a couple of these conversion kits out there. Depends on the life of the molds, how long I want to, how long they'll last before I pull them. So here's an example of that air bubble problem with the comparison with this side. You can see how big this air bubble was. Now, again, that technique of pushing down and letting the capillary action inside here vacuum, resin as you're letting go, that will reduce the chance of this bubble forming. So what happened here is I didn't do that properly, or I didn't pour enough resin in there. And when I did that, it sucked in air, and air bubble got trapped in here. So, this is a bad cast. So it's a mistake on my part for that. Again, I have a small little air bubble here, but this is fairly, fixable. So I'm going to keep this and replace my bad part. And we'll continue from there. So I'm just going to clean up my desk a little bit. God damn it, Viper. Closer. You want closer, mother effer? Josh is the only one watching me right now. He has nothing better to do with his life. Josh, you just come over sometimes when I do this. I should just message you. Hey, drive over here. So anyways, moving on to the next piece. This is the head, or the what's called the top of the headpiece, right? Now, I'll go over a little design problem with this mold in a little bit. So again, earlier when I said that if you don't completely seal this, or as close as possible, seal this up, you're going to have resin that's going to be excess here, and the part's not going to fit correctly. This is going to be kind of bubbled up a little bit because of there's excess resin that cured, and that's just because your mold didn't meet all the way. So what I'm doing here is I'm just gonna carefully, well, it doesn't look like I'm very careful about this, but these molds are pretty resilient. So I'm gonna yank this guy out and just pull the piece out, right? So again, mold cleanup. Make sure this stuff is gone. And we'll go with that. Now, this was an impromptu broadcast. I mean, granted, we have some followers, but every so often, I get an itchy butt and want to do something live like this. I'm working on this anyways, so why not show this process so you guys have a fuller or better understanding of this. So here is my two headpieces, or here's my headpiece, and you can see the difference between how thick they are. Hopefully you can see that. Maybe not. But it's noticeable if you put them side by side. And the reason why it's necessary, this will fit into another part. And if it's too much resin there, it's not going to fit properly. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, clean off my desk a little. And it's been a little bit of time. You can check on this, and you see that it's hardened a little bit, but it's still kind of soft. Again, this is a slower curing resin. It's going to take a good 15 minutes before it gets decently hard for me to even consider demolding. But I usually like to wait at least half an hour to an hour before I attempt to demold some of this stuff. So I'm just going to twist that off. And demold this piece. So this is the front nose piece. And what I had happened to this piece earlier is I tore the mold on this. So this is a fairly delicate piece, and I'm just gonna extraction tool, right? So I'm going to peel from one side and pull from the other side. And this is a fairly good cast of this piece. Now, earlier I said I did mess up on this mold. You see that there's two holes here, right? And it's about yay deep as far as the hole is, right? This side is not yay deep. Now, the reason for that is this part of the mold tore. And I think I still have the piece, or I probably threw it away. But if you look inside the mold, you can see where it tore. Hopefully I get the light just right. But you see this piece over here, there's a side of the nose piece where there's a that indented detail bit is there, and over here it's a considerably bigger piece. So since the inside of the problem with the mold is inside of this cavity is bigger than the outside, so it's very easy for this to tear. And look, I have a air bubble here, which for this piece is easy to fix. Now what I've been doing just to save some people some issues is I've been drilling out where that hole should be, so that should help folks when they're putting together this. Again, this is a resin kit. There's a considerable amount of work that needs to be done to make this look even remotely good. Again, I'm not a professional model caster, kit builder. This is actually the first kit I'm casting and selling. So you get what you pay for. But I think it's not too bad of a cast. I mean, I could have had this sent out and casted by a Chinese company, and then the next day other companies would be selling this product as their own. So my lack of faith in a Chinese company is, there's a reason for that. We smell our own and trust those motherfuckers. But anyways, let me clean off my desk again. So those are the 3 parts I've successfully casted. What I need to do is I need to cast the cables. So let's see here. I did the other side of the head earlier, so I have that going on. I'm still going to have to do another one of these, this side, because of the mistake here. So let's set that, get that ready, and let's get these pieces ready. So this is starting to harden up decently, but it's still not. It's still kind of soft to touch. If I push the a tool in here, I can make little dents in here. So eventually, this is gonna get hard enough that this will come out as one piece, and it'll have some rigidity to it. Yeah, I think that's the right word. So you see that it's still fairly pliable, right? It's very, very soft because it's not fully cured yet. It's got to let this. It's got to sit there for a while before it fully cures up. So, but since my pressure pot has these pieces have been sitting in a pressure pot for a little bit since we've been talking here, I could probably go and release the pressure. Now, I'm not sure if I want to do that or not. So let's discuss this piece. So when I made this mold, the cavity here, there's a little bit of a lip here. So when I made the mold, I effectively trapped myself when I tried to demold this, because there's a bit of silicone that lines this whole area that pretty much grabbing onto this part as I try to pull it off of here. So what I end up having to do is I had to cut this silicone off, this silicone chunk here, and that actually came up to here. You can see the scratch marks inside here where my knife came and cut through that silicone. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to re-pour some silicone over here and basically kind of repair the mold of sorts. Again, silicone is expensive, and I don't want to waste silicone. So I'm going to go ahead and do a mixture of some silicone so I could do a silicone pour. So that will be good right now for me to do, because I'm still waiting for this resin bit to cure up. So since captive audience of 2, let's do this, right? Again, 10-1, right? First step, I'm going to have to prepare the mold so that I don't get one solid silicone chunk. Vaseline, right? Very useful to keep silicone from sticking to itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush, Vaseline, and not liberally, just make sure the entire silicone nub here is coated, right? So I want to make sure. I do not want to apply any silicone here, or any Vaseline to this side of it, because I want the silicone to be sticking to this. I'm just going to make sure I have silicone over here, or Vaseline on the sides over here, just to make sure I'm not re-sticking any silicone that might leak out from this process. So hopefully this will work. Famous last words, right? So I have this giant hole here. I'm going to pour silicone in and hopefully fill that cavity up. So let's see here. Let's do this. Aha! You didn't know I was going to do silicone molding. Well, silicone mold repair, I guess, is what this is. But if it's all the same to you, it's just like pouring silicone. So first of all, this needs to be shaken vigorously. this is the activator or catalyst, right? This needs to be shaken up. Tongue depressor is a great tool to depress tongues and to make silicone, right? So I'm just gonna pour. I'm gonna guess how much I want to pour. I'm gonna say maybe that's a little too much. 57 grams of silicone, which will be plus 10% of that, so it'll be about 64 grams of silicone. It's actually 58 plus 10%. It's like being a bad tipper, right? 10%. So let's see here. I'm just going to add a positive 6 because, you know, if the more activator I add, you know, I'm just going to boost this to cure a little bit faster, but I don't want to boost it too much. Boosting it ever so slightly is just fine. So I'm just going to add 6 grams to this. So that will put us at about 66 grams. Clean off this. Well, you know, Vaseline and shots. There is a build gathering this weekend, so Josh, you know where the Vaseline is. You know, I'm not going to ask any questions. So now that this is in there, I'm going to go ahead and carefully mix so that I don't splatter. And I'm going to try to mix so that the viewing audience can see what the F I'm doing. So I'm basically just folding this stuff together. And you can see that you want to scrape the bottoms, you want to scrape the sides. You just want to make sure it's a nice, smooth, baby blue color. Now this is blue because it's the weight or the shore for the silicone. So silicone can be various hardnesses, various shores, and it depends on your needs, what kind of molds you're making. I like my molds fairly, you know, pliable, those, you know, not rock solid molds. So this is what I've been using is this. And I find this is decent for the longevity of the molds. I have old molds of metal thrusters that I still use that are still good after maybe, you know, 6, 8, maybe 10 years, and they're still fine. So you'll use what I like, what I'm used to. So when I'm doing this mixture, I'm also I'm introducing a lot of air into this. So what some folks will do is they'll actually throw this entire cup into the vacuum chamber, or what I have as a pressure pot, and pressurize this so that, you know, squeeze all the little bubbles out, or make them very, very, very small. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about that since there's no real undercuts in here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to, now this is poured, I'm going to carefully pour this into, this is famously going to go wrong. You can see the people that build or make resin cast are screaming if they see this, or yelling at me, "You're doing it wrong!" Well, you know what? I'm sort of okay with that. So I stopped talking so I could concentrate. Yeah. My wife likes to talk to me when I drive, and if I'm concentrating on trying to cut someone off because they looked at me wrong, she interrupts that. But slowly filling that cavity, filling that emptiness with silicone love. You know, some of you guys might be familiar with a little silicone love. Okay, that's wrong. So that's filled up, right? Um, Squeeze the mold a little bit. Oh, look at that air bubble. So I'm gonna same idea with the resin. So what I'm gonna do is I need a third hand. And this is just me trying to repair the damn mold. Getting silicone everywhere. Now hopefully this works and the stuff sticks well to each other, except for where my cast where my silk or Vaseline was at. Excuse me while I quickly try to plug up these holes that I have here so that I don't run into filling these vent holes that I created earlier for the part. And this is just your run-of-the-mill leftover sprue. This is good enough. So that, as she said, was that. So now this gives that wasted enough time that I could go back and oops. Oh, I'm gonna clean up a little bit, which won't take too long. A little bit of wasted silicone, but it's not that big of a deal. So time to check on this now. So I'm going to set this aside so I know that when my silicone is cured up, I'm also going to throw this in a pressure pot. So, but first of all, let's check on this. Let's see how rigid this stuff is. Still kind of paper thin here, but the puck is still fairly soft. You see that? It's still not completely cured yet. So I can let that sit, but since this is pretty much solidified, I can actually pull the part out of my pressure pot, which I'm going to do now. That hissing sound is the pressure pot, releasing all the air inside. I hope this is successful. The next piece I have to mold is this sucker. So this is the half bust piece that I'm gonna eventually make a silicone mold of this, so that if people want to have the bust piece with the headpiece, they can. There's another bust piece, which is this thing, which it's just not viable for me to cast and try to sell. I mean, this thing's ginormous. This would cost way too much to mold and cast. Of course, I could probably have it professionally done, and then, again, we're back to the China story again. So let's not go that route. So, time to pull out from my pressure pot. That's what these pieces look like now. You see that it's fairly solid. If I peel up one side of this, you still that earlier when I peeled up this, I didn't have that rubberiness, right? Because it's cured, and for it to cure up. So I'm gonna set this aside and let this kind of fully cure up before I start messing with it. In the meantime, I could stick my mold. And the problem with the resin casting is, or resin casting and mold making molds, is silicone takes a lot longer to cure up than the resin. So this will take about 3-4 hours before I can take it out of the pressure pot. Okay, that's done. This is gonna cure up, so I'm just gonna leave this alone for a while. Now, just gonna kind of move some of these pieces out here to see how many of these damn things I've made so far. Now you can see that my pressure pot's only so big. I can only cast so many parts at one time, and it takes roughly half hour for it to cure up. So this is going to take a little while to do. My original idea was to cast maybe 25, maybe 30 of these. So let's see how sick of this I get by the end of next week, or until I run out of resin, which I have quite a bit of resin, so we'll see how far I get. With that, thanks for tuning in. If I have a fun idea for next time I'm working on something and might pass on some, idea of, this process or whatever process I'm working on, I'll try to broadcast again now that I'm more familiar with the stupid YouTube broadcasting. So I'm going to see if I could figure out if they could add participants, because I saw there's a participant thing on there. But another time. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you Saturday. Josh. And let's see if I can end this correctly. Okay, laters, guys. Thanks for watching, man.